Now we're going to focus on our third part of invertebrates, which include mollusks and echinoderms. Let's first talk about mollusks. Mollusks refer to soft-bodied animals. Now, these soft-bodied animals usually are covered in some sort of shell, and these shells can actually be hard or soft, but they actually cover and protect the body. Now, mollusks are known to move by three different structures: tentacles found in squid and octopi, a ventral or belly foot by snails or slugs, or a large muscular foot coming out from inside the shell, such as in clams and scallops or mussels. These animals have a mantle. Mantle comes from the Latin referring to a cloak or covering, and this covering can be around the body or it can be on the inside of the shell. It can line the inside of the shell, such as in clams. And this lining can attach to the shell as well. Now, mollusks will respire, which means taking in oxygen, kind of like breathing, and they can do that through gills or lungs. Clams have gills, octopi, squid have lungs. Snails also have lungs. Mollusks will also reproduce through a sexual means. They have different reproductive organs, the gonads, and many of them will have a ciliated larva. A larva would be a baby. The maggot is the larva of a fly. The caterpillar is the larva of a butterfly. So the larva will be ciliated so it can swim and move through the water. Remember, little cilia are the short, many hair-like fibers. Now, mollusks have a circulatory system, and there are two types of circulatory systems. Now, make sure you know a circulatory system is the system that moves blood. The first type of system is going to be a closed circulatory system. That's not going to be the one we're going to focus on today. We have a closed circulatory system. A closed circulatory system keeps the blood within the blood vessels, primarily little capillaries. But an open circulatory system actually empties the blood into a cavity. So the blood leaves the main blood vessels and empties into a cavity for direct contact to the tissues. This is also very important for marine life that lives very deep in the ocean. They don't have to worry about blood pressure, and they don't have to worry about ocean depth, and there's no need for a large amount of oxygen in these deep ocean depths. Now, mollusks do have a nervous system, which is basically a response to stimuli. Most of them have bilateral symmetry. You're going to see that in the octopi and the snail, and some of them have asymmetry like the clam. And they will all have complete digestion, having a separate mouth and anus. There are 3 Mollus classes that you need to know. Class bivalva, bi meaning 2, so that it has 2 hinged shells with a muscular foot. This is usually your clams and your oysters and your mussels. Then you have class gastropoda, gastro meaning stomach and pod meaning foot. So basically it's a stomach foot. This would be your snail or your slug. Then we have cephalopoda, and we learned cephalo means head region. So this is a large head with feet. That would be your octopi, your squid, having a large head and tentacles. Let's take a look at all 3 of these. Bivalva. This page you will need to know the parts of the clam. Some of the parts you need to know are the muscles that hold the clam down. When you boil a clam, it relaxes the muscles, allowing the clam to open when it's dead. You can see the mantle, which lines the inside of the shell. You can see the lined gills. Now it's going to bring water, bring oxygen through the siphons and pass it over the gills and then back out the siphon. On the left side, you can see the muscular foot for movement. And then you can see the palps and mouth. Now the palps are like little mouth parts or little hands that direct things to the mouth. Here's the snail, the gastropod. It's like a large stomach and a foot. Now a snail does have a tongue called the radula, and it's like a little saw. It will actually saw leaves and other vegetative structures. Then you have cephalopods. You can see the tentacles, but majority of all the organs are in the head. If you take a look at that, you can see the ganglia of the brain, you can see the skull, the digestive system, which includes the crop and different organs. You can see that it has a mantle covering on the top of the head area. You can see the stomach, the gonad, which are the sexual parts, the heart, the kidney, the ink sac, the anus. Everything is in the head. Now let's focus on phylum Echinodermata. Echino refers to spiny. Derm or dermis refers to skin or tissue. So these are spiny skinned animals. These include the sea stars, brittle stars, sea cucumbers, sea urchins, and sand dollars. Now we're going to primarily focus on the sea stars, which was commonly known as the starfish. We're going to focus on the arms of the starfish, specifically the ventral side of those arms have tubed feet, and that's actually how they're going to move, not literally by the arms, but by the 2 feet on the bottom of the arm. Also, what's also ventral or at the bottom is the mouth. So where's the anus? The anus is on the top, the dorsal side, and we'll take a look at that as well. Now, sea stars will regenerate. If they're cut in pieces, they will regrow. So if you cut an arm off a starfish, it will regrow a full body. In the same way, a full body losing an arm will regrow that arm. Now, they can also reproduce sexually through the different male and female sex organs. And they do respire through gills as well. You will need to know this diagram. You can see the mouth is ventral at the bottom. Then we have the stomach. Then we have the anus, which is dorsal. Attaching to the stomach, we have digestive glands. These glands look all mushy if you cut open the arm. But also in the arm, we actually have these radial canals. The radial canals attach to the ring canal. The ring canal surrounds the stomach. Now, these radial canals branch off to each of the arms. The reason why they're called radial canals is because the sea star has radial symmetry. All of these echinoderms will have radial symmetry. And then coming off the radial canals, you have the tubed feet. And that's actually what will be moving, and they're very squishy and soft. You can also see that here. On the left, we have the dorsal side. On the right, we have the ventral side. Here's a sea star, brittle star, sea cucumber, sand dollars, and sea urchin. We are now in our last section of invertebrates. We're going to focus on arthropods. Now remember, invertebrates don't have a backbone. These specific invertebrates will have an exoskeleton, and that is one of the defining character traits of arthropods. So all arthropods are going to have 3 defining traits. The first one is having, as we said, having an exoskeleton, which is an outside skeleton. Not an endoskeleton, not an inside, but an outside skeleton. Now, when an arthropod, such as an insect, needs to grow and get bigger, it will shed its outside skeleton, and that is called molting. Another character trait of arthropods is that it has a segmented body. Included in the segmented body, we will have legs growing off, and it will have jointed legs. So all arthropods will have an exoskeleton, a segmented body, and jointed legs. Now there are 5 classes that are characteristic to arthropods. The first class is Malacostraca, or crustaceans. This includes aquatic arthropods, such as lobsters, crabs, shrimp, and crayfish. Then you have arachnids. Now, arachnids include spiders, scorpions, and ticks, and these arthropods have 4 pairs of legs. Then we have class Chilopoda, which are centipedes, which has 1 pair of legs per body segment, and then Diplopoda, which is millipedes, which has 2 pairs of legs per body segment. Now, centipedes and millipedes do not have 100 legs or a million legs. It's characterized by having one pair of legs per body segment for the centipedes and two pairs of legs per body segment for the millipedes. And then we have class insecta, and these animals can have wings, no wings, but primarily they have three pairs, a total of 6 legs. So let's focus on our crustaceans first. Then we'll move to the next sections. For class Malacostraca, these are commonly known as crustaceans. And as I said before, these are aquatic arthropods. They have gills and they live underwater. Now they can come out of the water, but they have to keep water in their gills. Their body is divided into a cephalothorax, which is a merged head-chest. So there is not a distinguishable separate head and separate chest like an insect. This is a merged head-chest called a cephalothorax. Now, cephalo means head region, thorax means chest. And then, besides the cephalothorax, they have an abdomen, which contains the lower digestive organs. Crustaceans have one pair of antennas. Usually these have chemoreceptors that allow it to kind of taste and feel. It just doesn't touch, but it allows the arthropod to taste. They usually have these long ones, which are the antennas, and then they have the short little antennas, which are called attenules. And they're very small and short compared to the longer antennas. They have one pair of legs per body segment, 3 pairs of legs plus a pair of claws. Crustaceans do not have wings because they're aquatic. They're not going to be flying in water, of course, but they do have chelipeds. Chelipeds are claws. So especially lobsters, crayfish, crabs will have claws, and we're going to call them, those claws, chelipeds. Then we have gills. We talked about, because they're aquatic, they're going to have gills, and these soft feathery organs are going to be inside the exoskeleton. So water will be brought into the arthropod and passed over the gills for respiration. Now, we did say that these crustaceans can go on land. They're going to hold the water in their gills, very similar to how we hold our breath. And then when we dissect the crayfish, we're actually going to take a look at 3 mouth parts. We're going to look at the maxilliped, the maxilla, and the mandible. Now, the maxilliped is the most superficial or the most outer mouth part. They actually look like arms. They look like the feet of, or the legs of the arthropod. They actually grab the food, but they're actually part of the mouth. They grab the food and they bring it closer. It is then brought into the maxilla, and there are many maxilla pieces. Some look like little fingers, some look like little spoons, and they will kind of break apart and push in the food to the mouth. Now, the mandible does the primary crushing and chewing of the food. So it will really rip it apart, crush it, and the mandible actually does not go up and down, but closes side to side. Now, so our jaw consists of, for a human, consists of a upper non-movable maxilla. That's where our upper teeth are. That's our maxilla. But then our mandible is our lower jaw. We move our mandible up and down. The crayfish actually has 2 mandibles that open and close horizontally side to side, and they crush the food. So our mandible moves up and down. We only have one, and that crushes the food. But the crayfish, the crustacean, has 2 that will move side to side. Here are some parts that we're going to talk about. As you can see here, we've briefly talked about the cephalothorax. You can see that head, chest is merged together. Then you can see the abdomen. Please make sure you put stars, highlight those in your notes, because you will need to know the cephalothorax and the abdomen. Then we're going to go past to the left, past the eye, down to the antennules and antenna. You can see the antennules fork, and they are smaller than the antenna. Then you can see the claw, which is the cheliped. Please put a star by antennules, antenna, and cheliped, or highlight those. Now, we will be talking about the walking legs. We'll see those. And we will be talking about something new called the swimmerets. And these are very small, very thin appendages. These appendages allow and help for some swimming in the water. And this is under the abdomen. Then we have the telson and uropod, which is another name for the flipper. Okay, again, we can see the antenna, the attennule. We can see the cheliped, the claw. Then when we look at the cephalothorax, there's a part called the rostrum, which is kind of above the eyes. It's kind of like a groove. If you think about a gladiator, where a piece of the helmet comes down between the eyes, kind of protecting the forehead, that's very similar to the rostrum. Then you have the cervical groove, which is a groove that you can kind of see between the front portion of the cephalothorax and the back portion. It looks like it's separating between the head and thorax, even though it's more merged together. Then we can see the walking legs, the swimmerets, and then the sections of the abdomen, and then the uropod and telson, which make up the flipper. Remember, this is the ventral, the belly view, and at this part we can kind of see the mouth parts a little more. We can see the maxilliped, the mandible. We can see the walking legs a lot better, as well as near the telson uropod, you have the anus. The anus is actually right on the flipper. So here we have complete digestion, the mouth at the beginning, where the beginning of the cephalothorax, kind of the head part, the mouth part is. And then you have the anus all the way down to the very end of the flipper. Let's focus more on the mouth parts. You can see the maxillipeds, ped meaning foot, so these mouth parts look like little feet. If we pull out, which you guys will be doing in your lab, if we pull out all the mouth pieces, you can actually see the maxillipeds, which are the long portions. There's some smaller maxillipeds, and then you have your maxillas. The maxilla is kind of like little spoon structures, and then the hard mandibles to crush the food. So many mouth parts. Now let's focus on the second class of arthropods called arachnida. These are our spiders, ticks, and scorpions. Number one, the body's divided into a cephalothorax. Remember, that's the head chest. So a spider does not have a separate head. It has a merged head and chest, and then an abdomen. So only two body divisions. Spiders do not have antennas or chewing mandibles, but they do have fangs. They will bite and inject venom. Then we have, in number 3, we have 4 pairs of legs, so a total of 8 legs attached to the cephalothorax. Spiders, scorpions, ticks do not have wings, but they do respire, they do breathe. And what's funny about that is that the lungs that they have are like the pages of a book. And this is not in the cephalothorax, not in the head region or the head-chest region, but this is actually in the abdomen. Now, spiders, ticks, scorpions are terrestrial, meaning they live on land. And they do have mouth parts that, as we said, are going to be more, a little different from what we saw with the crustaceans, but it's going to have some mouth parts helping with holding food, helping with actually eating the food, the fang to inject any venom, and then the pedipalps kind of pushing in the food, very similar to the maxillipeds, but the pedipalps is more dull, pushing in food into the mouth. Now for spiders, near the anus they have spinnerets. This is not in the anus, but this is going to be, these little spinnerets are going to be little finger-like appendages to allow the spider to secrete webbing. So we can see the cephalothorax, the head chest region. We can see the palps, which look like little legs, but these are kind of like the maxillipeds, helping with feeding. We have a total of 4 pairs. So we have a total of 8 legs, 4 on each side. And then you have the abdomen, and at the end you have the anal tube and the spinnerets. And you can see spiders, scorpions, ticks, and mites. Now that spider up at the top is a brown recluse. You can see a backwards violin on its cephalothorax. That is very poisonous. You do not want to see that spider. Now we're going to move to class Chilopoda and Diplopoda. Remember, chilopods are going to be our terrestrial carnivoric centipedes. Centipedes will eat other things. It will eat, because it's a carnivore, eat other insects, and it will have fangs, front claws as well, and many times often poisonous. Now, millipedes are going to be your herbivores. These are the ones that are going to be more, less, dangerous. Millipedes sometimes secrete a poison off their body to protect themselves, but these are primarily decomposers and herbivores. Now, centipedes are going to have 1 pair of antennae, and they're going to have 1 pair of legs per body segment. Millipedes are going to have 2 pairs of legs per body segment. That's how we're going to know the difference. So in the picture, the one on the left would be a centipede, the one on the right would be a millipede. Now we're going to move to our last section, which is class Insecta. Remember, all your arthropods have an exoskeleton, jointed legs, and a segmented body. Now let's first focus on Insecta. These do have separate sexes. One will be male, one will be female. Usually you can tell in the design, the pattern. Many times the female is larger. When you move into different things like bees, you'll have a queen and so forth. For number 2, the body is divided into 3 parts. This is going to be different from arachnids and crustaceans, in which they have a cephalothorax, an abdomen, 2 parts. Insects have 3 parts. Insects are going to have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. So the head is freely movable, and then you have the thorax, which is the chest, and then you have the abdomen where a lot of your organs are. We're going to have 1 pair of antennas, 3 pairs of legs attached to the thorax. Okay, so 6 legs. And then many insects will have wings. So we can have some insects no wings, some have 1 pair, and some have 2 pairs of wings. Now here's a new term that you'll need to know, spiracles. When we look at the grasshopper, we're going to take a look at the spiracles, and spiracles are little holes. These are breathing holes in the abdomen. And so basically they will connect to something called the trachea, which is the breathing tube. So where are they breathing? They're breathing through their abdomen, kind of closer to their butt. So it's not coming in through the mouth and chest. It's actually coming in through many holes, many kind of mouth openings for breathing in the abdomen. Now, insects are terrestrial, or usually terrestrial. Some of them can be in water, but terrestrial, remember, means on land. Now the mouth parts, they're going to have mandibles for chewing, they're going to have maxilla and a labrum. Now labrum kind of is like a palp, will push food in, and maxilla also kind of holding and pushing things into the mandible so the mandible can chew it. Then we have the open circulatory system. An open circulatory system is going to be different from a closed circulatory system. We as humans, the earthworm also had a closed circulatory system. This means the blood stays within the blood vessels. the blood will travel and then basically go through little capillaries and then travel back to the heart. So it'll go through veins, it'll go through arteries, and stay within the blood vessels. But with an open circulatory system, blood will then empty into a cavity and kind of like sit there and then be kind of pumped through. So there's going to be a separate cavity for an open circulatory system. It does not stay consistently or all the time in the blood vessels. It will empty into a container or cavity. Then insects have compound eyes and a tympanium. Think of tympany or tympanium. This is going to be the eardrum. Now what's crazy is the eardrum is actually on the thorax, on the chest region. And this is actually underneath the wings. And we'll take a look at that in the grasshopper. So if you can actually see in the diagram, we have the separate head, the thorax, the abdomen, and then we have the wings here. You will need to know, if you can highlight or star the types of wings. We have the protective outside wing, which is called the forewing. This is not the flying wing. The forewing is the protective hard wing. Then we have the hind wing. The underwing is the flying wing. So the flying wing is going to be protected by the forewing. Then we have the sound receptor, the little tympanic membrane, the tympanium, which is protected also by the forewing. So the forewing has two jobs, to protect the flying wing and the eardrum. And then you have the little spiracles, which are the breathing holes. Now grasshoppers have a simple eye, which will kind of sense light, and then a compound eye, which will actually see. And then we have the antenna. Now internally we have the brain or ganglia. We have a ventral nerve cord, which means along the belly, not dorsal. Then we have digestive glands, an ovary, and then you can see the long heart, more dorsal. And then you have the anus, and you have the kind of egg-laying opening, which is very large in the back. So you can see with this grasshopper, this is the type of grasshopper we're going to be dissecting. You can see the forewing, which is the protective wing. The hind wing is the flying wing. You can see the antenna. You can see the mouth parts, the labrum, the palp. You can see the head, thorax, abdomen. You can see the egg-laying opening in the very back. Ovi referring to ovary. And positor meaning dropping off. Okay, you can see that here where I labeled legs. Eggs are going to be laid here. Now we're going to conclude this with three types of metamorphosis. And basically these are controlled by hormones. This is very similar to going through puberty for insects. We have number one, which is incomplete metamorphosis. This is where they do not change from maybe a baby maggot or a larva into an adult. This is basically, we have an egg and then we have a miniature. It looks like the adult. This would be like with grasshoppers. So you have a little tiny itty bitty grasshopper called a nymph, and then it goes through molting to get bigger to become the adult. That's incomplete. Number two is complete. This is where you have a distinguishable egg larva stage, like a maggot, a mealworm, a caterpillar, and then it goes through a pupa stage, which is like a cocoon, and then it turns into a new looking thing like the adult. And this is a natural form. Then we have some which is no more metamorphosis, there's no changing whatsoever. And we're going to focus on 5 insect orders. We're going to be focusing on Hymenoptera, which are bees and ants, Coleoptera, which are beetles, Diptera, which are flies, Lepidoptera, which are moths and butterflies, and then lastly, Orthoptera, which are crickets and grasshoppers. So please know your insects.